here at the Independence Reformed Bible Church, we do allow for questions following the service. As we go forward, at least in the first about 8 chapters of Ecclesiastes, there's not a lot to encourage us. Solomon is going to be burying us before he brings us back up. So, just kind of fair warning for what's ahead. Who has a question this morning? Seats from your seat. Okay. Yep. We can pick you up. Just speak up. Just make sure you speak up.
Okay. I just have a question. I've heard this before. I don't know how true it is. Is it true that before Charles Darwin passed away, that supposedly on his deathbed he reneged on
right
on
deathbed conversion?
Is that true?
Charles Darwin. Lot of controversy about that. I have not seen the original source for that myself. I've seen tracts that say that, but the tracts that I've seen that say that do not. I've never seen it go back to an original source. I've not seen it, and I've looked for it. Maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but I haven't seen it. It's a nice story. I'd like to club some people over the head with that one myself, but I haven't seen it. Pretty nasty story there at the end, right? Who else has a question? Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about what is the fear of the Lord and how do we actually fear the Lord and what's the result of it?
Yeah. The question was, what actually is the fear of the Lord? I want to. Yeah. Yeah. I want to briefly start off by saying what it's not. Some people want to do that reverence thing, and it certainly involves that, but it certainly isn't limited to that. Because what do you mean by reverence? If all you say is reverence, it seems to me all you're doing is begging the question. Then what do you mean by reverence? I think fear is fear. It's just throughout the Bible too often to be otherwise. An example, of course, is Joseph. Just read that recently. Every human ideal for him would have been to have taken advantage of that situation with his master's wife. We already had in the passage that his master Potiphar didn't know anything was going on there, so certainly could have gotten away with it for a while. There's only one thing that keeps him from doing that. He fears God. Now, we don't believe in a God to fear anymore, right? The God we believe in, he doesn't punish, right? No wonder we're in such a mess. Honestly now. No wonder we're in such a mess. Any guy in any man in this room right now, how much do you fear God? When is the last time you looked at porn? You know what's going to keep you away from that? Is fear of God. Because as a fear of anything else, you can hide it from everybody else. But you better understand that God is looking at you when you even think about that porn thing. I hate talking about it, but it's been a while since we talked about it, and it needs to be talked about. Any man in this room, pornography, it calls to you all the time. Pornography now calls to us like wisdom calls to us, like we read in Proverbs. Always calling at us. What is going to keep you away from that? If it's less than the fear of the Lord, you're in trouble, in big trouble. The fear of the Lord, I believe, is a recognition that God will call you to account for the bad things that you do. He will do it. And I believe that's exactly what Solomon actually says at the end of the book. Talk about fearing God, for God will, and we're going to talk about it more, but he even says the things that are public and the things that are secret. He says that specifically there at the end, the secret things. We're going to talk more about that. A lot more to be said on that, of course. Who else has a question? John.
Less of a question and more of a comment on what Tim just asked about the fear of the Lord. Every one of us, I'm guessing, has received a parking ticket from Rita the meter maid. I have. Most of us have. We pay those tickets. Why is it? Because we fear Rita the meter maid. There's no doubt in our minds that if we don't pay that ticket, eventually the car is going to get a boot, or towed, or some problem. We don't have any doubt about the authority and the power of Rita the meter maid. Contrast that with our fear of God, and we doubt that He's going to punish us. We doubt that there's going to be any retribution for sin. And it's just a gut check to say, I fear Rita, the meter maid, more than I fear God. And it's a contrast that's real because we've experienced the tickets. And we may not have yet experienced the punishment of God. Just a comment.
Anybody want to follow up on that? Yes.
We decided to read through Ecclesiastes as a family, and
How's that going?
we're on chapter 10, so we're getting there.
Okay.
11's pretty good. And I think it's in 9 or 10, it talks about, the wicked won't see their punishment here for a long time, basically. And it looks like the wicked are prospering and so forth. And we really don't see here on earth their punishment. So it's, in some regards, and thankfully for God's mercy, He is slow to anger. And we don't necessarily see the result of that. It looks like the wicked are having fun, the wicked are prospering, they're getting rich and all these things, and nothing's happening. So is there really God? So that could maybe cause people to fear God less because He is part of His attributes, slow to anger. So anyway, maybe as a follow-up to John's comment.
If we'll just fear God on our own, without Him cracking the whip on us, we'll just be in so much better shape. Yes?
Mr. Bing's comment, would you say it's accurate because with the ticket, it's so direct, we know exactly what it's for, and we're like, okay, this is because I did this. But when God punishes us, there's so many explanations that we use for ourselves. We're like, oh, well, this is because He's, it's not, I feel like it's harder to be like, because I sinned this way, this is happening to me. It's more like, oh, well, God does things mysterious ways, like who knows? So I don't know, maybe is that part of it, do you think?
It is part of it. You have people now saying, even Christians saying, well, you can't connect any judgment in history with anything that anybody ever did. Even Christians say that kind of thing now.
Right.
And we say, well, there's such a thing as Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, that was way back then. But the fact of the matter is, we have to approach this thing like this. God does not owe us any single thing at all. He did not owe us salvation. That was His grace. The angels did not. The angels felt they had no means of salvation. He did extend that to us because of His grace. That's the only reason we possibly know. Because that's the first thing we obviously have to remember. But the rest of it really is that if God pours out His judgment on us, we deserve more than we get anyway. So let's not worry about this judgment connected to this sin or whatever. How about if we just fear God at the very beginning and take whatever comes from His hand as His grace and His goodness to us? Anything less than that, we're in all kinds of trouble, it seems to me. All kinds. Yes?
What kind of things do you think that us as parents can do to help our children fear God more?
They can start by fearing you. Uh-oh. Because we have this idea that you can't love and fear, and this is a problem we run into, right? I heard a secular person say this one time. How in the world can you love someone and fear them at the same time? So an interesting thing happened when my son was in boot camp with the Air Force. This is definitely not what I'm about to say is not an endorsement to jump into the military. Either way. We can talk about that later if you want. They were so in fear of their drill inspector, whatever they called him. I don't even know what they called him in the Air Force. They were in fear of him. But you know what would happen at the end of it all? When they got through the training? I mean, this guy that had given them nothing but hard time the whole time. Every recruit was like crowded around this guy and wanted his autograph, wanted to be seen with him, wanted his picture taken with him. They loved him. Now, how can that be? That can be because we ultimately love the person most who tells us what we need to hear the most. In the end, that's the way it is it not? Who is hated by the kids? It's the parents who neglect them, right? Right? Well, what is neglect? Neglect is a failure to do and to be what is necessary for the welfare of those children. Now, when I say they can start by fearing you, most of the time it's don't be late for supper. Most of the time it's benign stuff. Would you put away the Legos? I was up late last night at 3 o'clock in the morning. I stepped on one of those things in my bare feet. Have you ever done that? Yowza. Pick up the Legos. Most of the time it's things like that. But especially at a young age, do the children learn how to respond to what you say quickly, without the yelling and without the screaming? And see, this is really where I'm going. Do we have homes where children respond without the yelling and the screaming? Do we have those kinds of homes? You see, because the more we can learn to respond to righteous, godly authority, there's all kinds of power out there that's not righteous and godly, but parents is a authority system that God has set up. Do we teach our children to respond to that the first time? Because if we do respond, we're going to have a lot easier time responding to God's word, but if we have to have God yell at us and destroy us before we pay any attention to him, we're in bad shape there. See, children should fear their parents. Not in a sense, though, of, oh, if dad's in a bad mood, he's going to like smack me over the head. No. No, not at all. We should be able to talk to our children quietly. And we should be able to say, from the other end of the aisle in the grocery store to our child, small child, hey, come here. And you know what? They should come here. Without the yelling and without the screaming and without the other nonsense that goes on with that. Teaching children to fear the Lord, I think, starts with teaching them to understand, obey their parents' words when spoken quietly. Isn't that what we should be doing when we read the Bible? The Bible's quieter than our parents, right? It's words. We want to get to that point where we read that Bible and respond to it just because it's there and just because it's right. A lot more, again, to be said on that point. Tough words here this morning. Tough words. But how often have we seen it where the discipline that goes on in the home is done by decibels? Discipline by decibels, right? Child won't listen. What's the next thing that happens? The decibels go up. And we're trying to reach that decibel level where the kids will actually respond. Not good. Definitely not a good way. Because what's going to happen after a while, the child will get used to the decibels. And discipline by decibels won't work anymore. Yes?
Just as a testimony to fearing your parents, I remember as a really little, like in Sunday school, they always did the same exercise where they were like, you know, Jesus died for your sins. Raise your hand if you've ever committed a sin. You're a bunch of little toddlers who don't, you know, some raise their hand, some don't. And I always raise my hand because the connection between my spankings and sins was so strong. Even though you guys never gave me the, well, you really grieved Jesus, or this was a sin, the connection between my disobedience and the spankings was so strong that I was like, oh yeah, I got a spanking this week. So it's obvious to me. And that was the first kind of gospel connection I remember having as a little kid. And it wasn't like a Bible story because, you know, I can't remember that. I remember getting spankings before I remember being the first Bible stories I ever heard. So.
Who's your parents? Well, yeah.
And I was a really good kid, too.
That is the idea, though. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. So you remember spankings before Bible stories?
I don't know if that's bad to say. Well, I think about it a lot because I hear a lot of people saying, you know, before I spank my kids, I want them to understand that they hurt Jesus when they disobeyed me. And I don't remember that. I remember and I remember feeling bad, like, oh man, like mom's mad at me because, you know, I did the wrong thing. And I was, like, I felt really loved, but I don't remember. I think the discipline came before the understanding of Christ. You know, I don't remember the lectures. I just remember the action and response kind of more.
Yeah.
I could be remembering it wrongly.
Well, not to get into this topic, but I said discipline by decibels earlier. There's another discipline that goes on, and that's what I call discipline by discussion. We have this long discussion, right? And the child does something that was told before not to do, right? And then instead of discipline happening, and discipline, my friends, is discipline and punishment. Let's separate the two, all right? Punishment occurs, but sometimes it's not punishment enough, and sometimes it was actually worth it, right? I bit my brother. I was told to stand in the corner for 5 minutes. You know what? That was worth it. If all I got to do is stand in the corner for 5 minutes, so I get to bite my brother, I'll bite him again. No discipline. Some punishment, no discipline, right? Discipline only occurs when when this happens in a child's mind, right? This is discipline. The child says, you know, it wasn't worth it, and if I had the opportunity to do it again, I wouldn't have done that. Now we have discipline, right? And so at this age, you know, at this young age, quite frankly, we couldn't do discipline by discussion. We were looking for a specific behavior, right? And discipline by discussion is discipline delayed and denied, right? Child does something wrong, right? And then mom and dad explain to him that they shouldn't have done that. Now, do we think that the child is like getting new information? Like, oh, if only I would have known that, then I wouldn't have done it. Now, discipline by discussion is generally speaking a denial because we don't want to follow through on what we're supposed to do. Discipline by decibels and discipline by discussion, bad news. It has to be real discipline. So the child says, if I had the opportunity to do that again, next time, nah, was not worth it. And I think that's why, that's what we took to these situations. Before a child can understand all about hurting Jesus, shall we say, there's certain behavior that we have to see. And it's limited. You know, it's not like you have to always, get the paper when dad says, or get my slippers or whatever. But there are times, and as we all as parents know this, there are times when discipline is quite easy. There are times when a child simply defies your word, right? says no or is defiant. Those can be a little bit easier times to exercise what needs to be exercised than some others that are more difficult. Another topic for another day. Favorite of mine, though. Who else has a question? Sorry, I got us off on a rabbit trail there a little bit. Anybody want to bring us back? Well, thank you for your kind attention in a difficult sermon and a difficult book. It will improve, but it'll be a while.